I remember we'd only been married a couple years, and someone told me, they said, whatever is unhealed or unresolved in your past relationship, you carry it into your new one. The circumstances might look different, the setting might look different, the person is different, but whatever is unresolved continues to go forward.
And our culture has told us that marriage should be easy. We sort of buy these ideas that if it's not, or if I'm experiencing anything that's difficult, there's a problem here. Our hope is that people will move away from a culture that tells you that this is all about yourself, it's all about me, and start to understand and embrace God's vision, which is it's about an us.
And the other thing that struck me is we're always going to be fighting for marriage. Like it's worth fighting for. And it's this idea of, are you going to fight proactively or reactively?
What would you say to the person listening who maybe they're one spouse who wants to do this and the other one is more closed off, or because they didn't grow up in families where communicating was a part of the way that they did relationship, they don't even know where to start?
The biggest tool that we got early on was for me to say, or for him to say,
Gabe and Rebekah. It's so great to have you guys with us here on At Home. Addison, Julie, we're all set. No, I was thinking about having y'all on, and it's funny. Addison didn't even know this story.
I didn't know the story.
I was first introduced to you, Rebekah, on a podcast.
really?
It was probably 8 years ago, several years before we ever met in person. I didn't even know any connection with Lisa. I had my AirPods in and I was at a huge consignment, like children's clothes consignment sale, just zoned out. And you were talking about living in New York and moving through anxiety. And you presented your story with such truth and accessibility. It was shocking to me because I really had not experienced a communicator in that way. And it's one of those memories that I really shouldn't have because I don't even remember all of my kids' births.
But that
It
consignment
sticks
store.
with me. And then when we were preparing to have y'all on, I was like, this really feels very full circle that here we are on a podcast with you. And yeah, I do want to just recognize that the two of you and the way that you do life and marriage. I'm thrilled that you wrote a marriage book because you're the type of people who should be writing marriage books. Because now being in community with you, we see that you live what you write.
Yeah.
And because you've lived it, then you write it, and then you continue to live it, and you continue to build upon that foundation. So thank you for writing this marriage book, The Fight for Us, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm so excited to dive in. I was reading it, had already gleaned a lot from it, and I think it's going to be so beneficial for so many of our listeners, whether they're married or not married, to start to really think about these things and how they want to be intentional with your marriage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
giving us an opportunity to talk about it. You know, when you set out and decide prayerfully to engage on a project like a marriage book, and you know, we've been married a minute, but we're on our 28th year. But you still know you don't know what you don't know, and you haven't lived enough life to be a total expert. But for Rebekah and I, it felt honest after doing years of retreats and counseling a lot of couples that there were some things we've definitely learned in our journey that was helping people. And so let's try. And it's been a great project for both of us.
Well, obviously there's a passion project in every writer, and those passion projects are the ones that you've had to really wrestle to the ground. They're so deeply personal, intimate, and I've done that in the free fall, like kind of those early books about anxiety, because it was like rock bottom, crash and burn. But it's hard to invite somebody else into that story unless they're willing to tell it too. And
It took me a while.
yeah.
Do we really have to tell that story?
And I was like, you know, everything good is hard. You know, everything is costly. Everything that is redemptive is costly. And so marriage is one of those things. And even in our journey of highs and lows, you know, there were seasons where I'm like, are we going to ever be able to really share this with people? Like, is this going to always be taboo in the church or whatever? And I just found the freedom always came when we did tell the truth to one another, obviously first to God, but then to one another, and then to our friends, and just feeling like, you know what, let's just poke the air out of the balloon, like all the stigma that everyone has to be perfectly looking appropriate on the outside, but the inside, like there's an internal wrestle. And so that's our hope with the book, is that not that it normalizes conflict, but that it at least helps us understand that because it's God's vision for our flourishing, then of course the enemy is going to try to do everything at every turn to destroy it. Yeah. So if we can just be honest about that right out of the gates and up front, then people will, my hope is they'll feel more seen and understood. And then that there would be a lift of that burden when we carry those things together.
Yeah. We'll return to At Home with the Beveres shortly. But first, a quick shout out and big thank you to the fam.
Wait, you have to tell them what the fam is.
Oh yeah, I need to do that. The fam is the community of monthly supporters who make this podcast possible.
We started At Home to help families and marriages flourish in this wild and wonderful world.
There's a lot more we want to do for the thousands of families tuning in, and your monthly support will help us reach and resource more people. If you want to learn more, just click the link in the show description.
Now, let's get back to the episode.
Speaking of conflict, I feel like we've been in a season of fresh conflict in our marriage.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just going.
Let's
I'm
do
going
it.
there. Like we're diving straight
now
in.
I'm ready
Okay,
to talk.
let's do this. And I would say it all began when Julie's dad passed last year, and and we started to engage with each other in ways that we had never engaged with each other before. And I mean, we've been married 17 years this year, and you make the assumption that, hey, you know what? Like, I know this person after, 15, 17 years, whatever it is. Like, I know this person. I've figured out their patterns. I figured out what makes them tick. And I have never felt more disoriented than I have over the last several months. And so much of that has been getting to relearn Julie's origin story.
Yeah.
And y'all talk about this in the book, and the importance of curiosity and the way that the origin story is re-understood or remembered depending on the season, depending on the struggle, depending on what God's doing in someone's life. I'd love for y'all to share that, because for me, when I was going through the book, you even told me, because we're in a couples group together, you told me after one of the nights, you're like, oh, you're going to love the origins. Do you remember that? You're like, you're going to love the origin story chapter. I'm like, oh, I'm looking forward to reading it. And so much of that has been transformative in our marriage in this season. I feel like, even though it's been very painful and disorienting, I've gotten to know Julie in ways that I never knew her before this season.
I remember we'd only been married a couple years, and someone told me, they said, whatever is unhealed or unresolved in your past relationship, you carry it into your new one. The circumstances might look different, the setting might look different, the person is different, but whatever is unresolved continues to go forward. And I couldn't imagine that. I couldn't imagine having any kind of response pattern to Gabe that might look similar to what I would have done with my parents or my origin story. But I'm now, even at 50, still finding ways in which I try to retreat and hide when there's conflict, even fresh, like I did as a child. Wow. Just because I didn't have a way to verbalize that as a kid. And I think that's really important, because we always have to look back to move forward. And so many of us in our lives, we want to cut ties and move on, right? Going no contact with our parents and just let that be what it is. But the unresolved or the unhealed child is still, like, we're just a bigger version of that. And what we used to use as a kid to cope, to get through, does not serve us as adults. It serves us as kids to survive, but you don't want to be just surviving with the person that God put you with for the rest of your life. The whole goal is repair. And that's partly what has been, even for us, I want to encourage couples too, that every seasonal shift, every new stage of life creates new conflict. Because you can really nail it, before kids. And then you finally figure out the toddler sleep pattern, right? And then they get off to school and you're like, we've made it, But then like a few years later, puberty begins, and it's like you start back from zero. You're like, I know nothing. And I think that's disarming for people to go, don't think it's a one and done, right? It's circling the mountain, and you're going to continue to find seasons where you have conflict because the stress is bigger.
And the other thing about the importance of knowing your story, your origins, the trauma perhaps that you experienced, and some of those are big T trauma, some are little, But when we look back and take time to reflect on that, to see how it shaped our personality, I know for me, when I was 11, a journey began where I started to put walls up to people around me because it was to protect my heart and to protect myself from something inappropriate that had happened with an adult around.
Yeah.
And I know for a lot of people, these stories exist, but they don't even know what to do with them. And I believe God's given Rebekah to me, and I think for you guys in your relationship, you to Julie, to as she's processing through the trauma and the healing that you're just getting to know in this moment of Julie's life, because she's remembering things that she literally didn't want to remember, but she's remembering now. Oh, yeah. And that was happening for me. Rebekah gets to know a different side of me, but also helps me process through, oh, that's why you feel that way. That's why you're responding that way. And when we can get back to understanding how God could heal the trauma, what we lay out in this book is that God's giving you your spouse as part of his desire to heal you through that relationship. Yeah. Like, this is how we get back to secure attachment, if we're going to use therapeutic terms. Yeah. You didn't experience that as a child. It doesn't mean you're hopeless. It means through your marriage, we believe God's got a healing balm in that's going to help you become whole again.
Yeah. And speaking of trauma, in case the listeners are curious, there's like kind of big T and then small t. And the idea here is that you might have an acute incident, right? Like something traumatic, and that would pair to something like, whether it's some form of abuse, some form of a school shooting or something that like you just will never forget that moment. And so you have a way of responding to that as a child. And that's always dependent on how young you were, how proximate you were to the event, and then kind of what that fallout looked like. Were you nurtured out of that? Were you counseled through that? Or did you have to self-soothe and do that on your own? The lower T trauma is also very important because that is the majority of us. And it's so like a low hum. So it's like this chronic trauma. And it's a low hum, and it's basically the code of conduct that you were raised with in your home. And it's never your parents' fault. So I just want to say that right now, like whatever they bring, that was kind of the code of conduct in their home, and like they took their best foot forward and did that. But there are these unspoken rules of engagement in every household. And what that looked like in my family was that we were not allowed to question or discuss or debate. I mean, that was like not even on the table to even try to understand why some of these legalistic things were just how we were going to do life. And it was just because I said so. And I think a lot of families grew up in that. Oh, yeah. And that's okay to a point, but when you reach an age of reason and you are given that gift of rhetoric and you do have the ability to question and persuade because your brain is working and critical thinking is real and kids are taught to use that in school, but then you can't use it at home, then there comes a little bit of a like, oh, this isn't a place where I have a voice. Yeah. And so that's kind of what mine looked like. It wasn't any kind of like big T trauma, but it did look like over time I kind of had to raise myself and emotionally just alone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and in mine it was an environment where sharing your feelings was not appreciated. That was looked at as weakness. And I think I've met a lot of men who've grown up in that environment that if you're a man, you don't talk about your feelings, you move forward. And what we've learned in our marriage is that might be nice rhetoric. It does not work in a marriage, because when you can't take the time to name the ways that you're hurt or the ways that you're feeling shame, or when you feel angry, you can't process through, hey, I'm feeling this right now, let's talk it through. Yeah. Then you start to create a divide between your marriage and your spouse. And now there's total disconnection. And so a lot of our process was learning how to, for me at least, feel my feelings was the first step.
Recognize
but then
them.
Name them.
Yeah.
And then be able to ask for forgiveness, to confess and repent. Things I was holding resentments for Rebekah for years. Yeah. But because I didn't let myself feel or even process it, didn't feel safe to do that because of how I was raised, we never could get to healing. As much as she was longing for it, we couldn't name it. And so that's a journey I think every couple has to venture into.
As a wife, navigating a husband who's learning the ins and outs of feelings, how did you do that well, where you create an environment where he could process that and learn the language and grow in that? And how maybe did you not do it so well?
I've done it really poorly as well. I think early on, I did have language for my emotions. Thankfully, my dad was pretty emotional, and I felt it, from my father, I did feel like the freedom to cry or things like that. But I didn't, not so much in words, but just in expression. Like it wasn't shut down. It was just like but I was still a firstborn that tried to like kind of keep it together as well. So it's like a unique balance. But with Gabe, I would ask him questions like, so what are you excited about, or what are you dreaming about, or what are you longing for? And it would kind of like blank stare. And then there was a side of me that's like, well, at college, we would like write these little napkin dreams on our little, we went out for ice cream. That's all we could afford. And we would write like dreams we want to do together, if we got married one day. And I think when we were 3 years into marriage and we had Cade, I honestly think, so he was born with a Down syndrome diagnosis, and we found out 6 hours after he was born. And it was traumatic, failure to thrive, 4.5 pounds full term. I had no fluid at the end, and it was just an emergency C-section. So all of a sudden we're thrust into this parenting, motherhood, fatherhood role where like dreams even in that moment are being dashed, even though we don't have words for that. Like we don't even know what that looks like just because we were so ill-equipped. Now we see the gift in all of it, but at the time we were just scared. And even processing that together, I felt like I would just go cry on my own a little bit, just kind of having and then he just went in as protector and provider, because that was his core need, is that like, I need to make sure that this kid is safe. I'm going to be the protector and the provider, but I don't even know how to process my own grief through this or what that might look like. And so over time, when he started to try, his feelings would come out, and this is common with men. I love it. His feelings like, I feel like you don't do this, right? So that was really hard. I was like, I'm glad you're feeling so liberated in your emotion, but you've yet to name an emotion you're feeling. You're just, I feel angry that you always do this. I'm like, okay, well, anger, that's a real feeling. But it did feel like every expression was attached to my failure, like what I was doing wrong. So naturally I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't receive that. That's on you. You can figure that out, and that's not helpful either, because then he goes, well, this is why I don't tell you anything,
exactly.
right? So then you've got this stalemate, because he is trying to be vulnerable, but at the same point, I'm feeling attacked. And I think it's trying to discern what each of us can own, whether or not that was the other person's intention. And so the biggest tool that we got early on was for me to say, or for him to say, whether or not you meant this, when you said X, I felt this, insert negative emotion. So that it may or may not be what you mean to. Again, this might just be the way you're responding naturally, but I feel small or inferior, or I feel sad, or I feel lost, I feel confused, whatever that is. That was helpful.
Yeah, one of the biggest lessons I would say we've learned, and we talk about in the fight for us, is that the blame game becomes a big part of marriage relationships. And we all have friends who are having a struggle in their marriage, and usually the conversation is them telling you about what their spouse did, and it's always the other person. It's always the other person's fault. I mean, when we hear the divorce stories, I mean, we both know there's two sides of the story, but if you hear it from one person, it's 100% this other person's fault. And the enemy uses that, and I think that's what he does. He gets us to align and make agreement with an accusation about our spouse, how they're deficient in something, how they're not passionate enough, how they don't want to have enough sex, how they don't respect me, on and on and on, to where I start to agree with it, create a wall, a big barrier. We start to divide, and all of a sudden he's winning, and we're no longer in us. It's about me and what my needs are. And for Rebekah and I, what we've learned is how to turn towards each other quickly when we start to sense any of that building up, to acknowledge it. Confess it, to repent, ask for forgiveness, describe, hey, I was feeling this way, but I don't want to do that. And I know that's not who you are. We're both good-willed people who want to do well together. So let's come back to reset. We'll use that word a lot. Can we reset today? Can we have a reset from what just happened, and let's start over?
And it requires some form of an embrace. You can't just reset in your brain. Like, you need to have some form of a hug, or some I need to feel safe and relaxed and recline in some measure. The scriptures are so clear about be still and relax and remain. It just means there has to be an ease, not just okay, we're resetting. You have to come back to a baseline of exhale. So that you can, your brain can calm down, your stress response system can calm down, that you can hear now clearly, and you're not responding out of emotion.
And that's what I love, that the book, The Fight for Us, it's not, hey, get good at fighting for the sake of fighting, or let's talk about our emotions for the sake of talking about our emotions. It is that connection and the intimacy would be so strong. And you guys are really, really wonderful at giving such practical tools. The end of each chapter. If people were just skipping the chapter and going to those questions and setting aside 20, 30 minutes, maybe even an hour if, the stars aligned, to have these intentional conversations, it would be world shifting.
Yeah.
And there's a workbook that's going to go along with it also, right?
Right.
Yeah, we have a book called The Journal for Us that comes out in a few months. That's 10 conversations every couple needs to have.
That's awesome.
And it lays out a lot of the ideas that we talk about in the book, but in a conversational form where a couple that maybe is on a waiting list for a year to get into counseling, or they're just going through a situation, or they can't afford expensive counseling, but they could sit together and process once a month a conversation. It's going to give them very clear ways to do that, the questions to ask, because one of our learnings is that if we're not talking, we're not healing. And so a lot of marriages move into a dysfunctional dance where they get really comfortable in the dysfunction, but that dysfunction usually means we're just not going to talk about some things. Or when we talk about them, it's going to be so intense and angry, it's going to create even more damage. So we first don't know how to talk, so therefore we don't take the time to talk. And we want to help couples know, how do you turn towards each other, even when you have different personalities, different temperaments, very different perspectives, and start to process through some of these difficult things.
What would you say to the person listening who maybe they're one spouse who wants to do this, who's all in, would love to be going through this, and the other one is more closed off, or because they didn't grow up in families where communicating was a part of the way that they did relationship, they don't even know where to start?
Yeah.
Like, what are those initial, like when I said 20 to 30 minutes, they're like, are you kidding me?
Right. I mean, it can be as short as 15 minutes, but it's partly find common ground before you go, like, how can we fix the marriage? Maybe like there's got to be something that you still enjoy together, right?
So
if you're
good.
still, if you loved each other and you chose to give your life to each other, and you feel distant or disconnected and you don't know where to begin, and it is common for one or the other to pursue more in certain seasons. Now that might extend indefinitely, unfortunately, but so if you're the one who's pursuing and the other one's retreating, don't take that personal, because that is kind of common. Sometimes that ebbs and flows. But if you're the one who's really hungry for this and you're excited and you're eager, I would just still be curious with the other person and go, hey, just go ahead and diffuse it and go, like, I know you're not interested in this. Like, you're probably discouraged. I know I feel discouraged a lot, but right now I kind of want to give this a go. Like, what would you be willing to do? Like, what if we just tried this thing? Or maybe we went, like, for men, I know for Gabe and I, like, I wanted to have a bunch of like face-to-face conversations. Like, what if we just go for a walk? So I feel a little less threatened. Like, we have to have some resolve figured out, or have to commit to something I'm not ready to. Just find that place, like permission to play or recreation or something that you enjoy. Because again, if you start to enjoy each other without the pressure of like, we got to fix everything in our marriage, but you find that common ground that's outside of calendar and kids, but something that's just the two of you that you used to love, or figure that out, then you can add in like, hey, let's just talk about like these 3 topics, or here's some 3 questions. What would you be interested in talking about? I'm open, So the person who's more excited should give a little more grace to that one who's not, or just like, what would you be willing to do? And that's men or women. It just depends on who's more engaged.
And I would say to women, Julie, you guys are intense. I mean, for men sitting across from their wife who's saying, I want to work on our marriage, or many times we feel, okay, I've done something wrong. I mean, we instantly take responsibility.
They
like,
hear, I want to fix you.
Yeah, if something's wrong, it
Yes.
must be me. I've done something wrong again, right? It's very discouraging.
Yes.
And it's not very motivating. So I think, to Rebekah's point, when she wants to have a conversation about something, if we can go for a walk or just do something active together where the conversation can come up. It could be just driving in the car, but sitting and like staring at each other on the living room couch for that conversation can be really hard. And guys will try to avoid that as much as possible. So just trying to be creative about how are we going to talk about it. And I do think women many times carry a burden relationally more than men. Like, we can kind of draw the containers up and like go to work, and the wife feels like left behind because she's carrying a burden all day, and the husband's at work and she's feeling left behind. Like, my husband doesn't even care about me. And yet it's just the way we're wired. Like
Yeah.
we do go and do that. But when we come back together, there is moments and opportunity for us to connect, and we want that. Like my heart longs for that, but I don't feel as naturally gifted at it as
Right.
Rebekah, and I think many women do. At how do we navigate this relational, emotional entanglement problem?
Right. Yeah. And God made us that way. We're like women were one bucket, right? Everything's integrated. Like it doesn't matter if it's like a kid or a recipe or a friend or this podcast, like all that's in your big container for the day. Whereas for men, like there is a compartmentalization that allows them to kind of lead here and lead here and lead here and lead here and not get ruffled if one of them is falling apart. And that's okay. That's good. You know, if we were both falling apart with the one thing, then like who am I leaning on, or who are you leaning on to go, okay, I'm coming across a little bit like direct and cold, but it's partly because I just came out of that bucket, you know, and I want to re-enter home and have more of the nurture, and you're my wife, you're not my peer at work. And so that's good and it's okay. We don't have to take that so personally. I think that is part of our wiring that God gave us. But if that is true, then it means that you might need a little more buffer between those two transitions. Or if there's a conflict and you're ready to just like avoid the repair because you just want to like get an email done so you feel successful at something. And I'm like, I'm still over here feeling really hurt, but you're off shooting up some emails. Then I'm going like, we're going to need to talk about this, right? Yeah. I'm no longer angry or animated, but I'm like, we're not just going to like act like this didn't happen, right? And so he wants to, but he's just timid in like how to transition, because that's such an insecure place of like how to repair. And I think repairing is a big deal. People like they experience the rupture, but they never repair. Yeah. And so over and over again, there's a rupture, which means like this relationship is not safe to be honest or to disagree. And then that dysfunctional dance, you know, there's 4 types basically. You have your silent, your intense, your avoidant, or anxious. And each of those are triggered like just because that's become your pattern. Yeah. Anytime conflict arises, the silent is always triggered by hurt, right? So resentment slowly grows, but you never really repair. The intense is us and maybe you guys, where you just say it all, right? You're leaving the last man standing.
And our kids are like, are y'all getting divorced?
I know. Our kids actually revealed that to us like recently. They're like, remember when we were 13 at that wedding in New York City and you guys were fighting a lot? And I looked at Kennedy and Kennedy looked at me and we're like, our parents getting divorced. And we never knew until like 10 years later. And they're like, yeah, I don't think so, but I hope not. I mean, I don't know. And they never even talked to us about it. So I was like, well, we have some things to improve on, but you're right. They don't know what to do with that. And then the anxious one is where it's just like, it's walking on eggshells, both of you all the time. And then the avoidant, you know, silent and avoidant sound similar, but the avoidant is more triggered by guilt. And that's like, I know I'm coming home a little bit late, but I'm not really ready for what like is going to confront me when I come home late. And I'm just going to keep the peace, but not be present. Yeah.
And knowing your style, how does that help you engage?
Yeah, when you understand the way that you as a couple start to dance together and you've gotten really comfortable with it, the first step is to recognize this is dysfunctional. Like we have to first just go, this isn't how a marriage is supposed to operate. This isn't flourishing for us to avoid each other, to be silent, to be just intense all the time. There's got to be a healthier way. And I think a lot of couples always feel like there must be more to marriage. Like I feel like there's some vision of marriage and I don't feel like we're finding it. You're usually trapped kind of in this dysfunctional dance. And the way out of it is to humble yourself, to not blame your spouse, to take responsibility, say this is something I'm going to go to work on with God. Yeah. I'm going to invite him in to reveal to me the areas that I'm sinning. I'm not cherishing Rebekah. I'm not caring for her the way that she needs to be loved. She's not feeling loved. I might think I'm showing her love, but she's not feeling it. So I better change some of my behavior, my approach, repent, talk to her about that, ask her for forgiveness. So this all takes humility, right? This is the hardest thing in a marriage. We know plenty of marriages that just keep going on, prideful, and it's their fault. The moment Rebekah and I were able to humble ourselves before one another and God and go, okay, I'm probably the one to blame here. So I'm going to do some investigation. Yeah. And I'm going to try to figure out, what did I do? And that's a lot of our relationship resolving now is we have something happen. And I think we both go away going, how did I contribute to that? And how quickly can I call Rebekah right now? I'm driving to work. I've got to get to the office for a meeting, but I need to apologize for my part. I overreacted. Even if she hurt me, I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
And she's owning her part. And you quickly get into this healing rhythm that takes you out of the dance and starts to turn towards each other.
Yeah.
And you get into a better rhythm together.
Yes.
And that's where healing happens.
Yeah, we learned early on that when we would fight, we would separate. And then we would both feel more empty and alone, you know, and then we would apologize, but we never really, we're apologizing for the conflict, but we're never getting to the root of why there was conflict.
Yeah.
And so you're asking for forgiveness for the behavior, that it got escalated, but what triggered, what is behind that? And we never, without counsel, without other people asking those deeper questions, like, well, we don't want to go back. And why am I so triggered about how much you spent at whatever? Or why are you so triggered about like me not being available to you because I'm trying to help the kids? You know, like we both have these primal needs that aren't being met. And for whatever reason, we're not really getting below the surface. So we're just circling here, and then we never truly repair. Meaning, and it's not just repair to where we were, it's me now knowing a more intimate, deeper part of your soul that I just didn't have access to when we were teens or when we were early 20s. And it's partly because you didn't have access to it. So if you don't have access to it, you're not going to certainly be able to reveal that to me. So each season, repair all of a sudden makes the relationship so much stronger than it ever was before there was. But it does mean you're going to kind of go toe to toe. And we always tell our kids it takes two to fight. But we don't buy that when it's us, right? It's like, no, it really was just you. And it's like, no, it's both of us. Now, who starts it, who ends it, it really is irrelevant because both of us are like, we both walk away alone, feeling empty and alone. And that is not what God's intention is. So even if I was hurt by it, I still know that behind that hurt, I can have grace and go, I know behind what you were doing, like I understand why you did that. And I do forgive you. And I also understand, will you forgive me for the way I just retreat and shut down because I don't feel safe or something, you know, partly because I might not have felt that as a child. So it does help us lean in. And it's embarrassing to say that it wasn't until our like 20th year plus did we really truly go like, we're not just going to fix it by apologizing for escalating things. We really want to know each other better. We want to learn. We want to grow. We want to heal. We want to heal. We don't want to cope or manage. We want to heal. Because I just have seen a lot of marriages in the church stay together because covenant requires that, and when that's a good thing. But they were lifeless. Like there was no energy around it. There was no zeal. There was no shared passion. There wasn't a heritage that kids behind that would look at and be like, I want that. And so I'm back to going like, let's pursue marriage with integrity, like fully and wholly. And that usually requires just total stripping down of like whatever like things we've built.
Yeah. Well, and when y'all talked about calling in the book and having a joint calling, I know as you go through seasons and when you're in the season of being a mom at home with the kids and it feels like your husband's living his best life, even though he's at a desk job from like 8 to 5, you're like, must be nice. Or they're saying the same thing to you, like, oh, you napped today. That must be
All
nice.
you had was laundry and a shower.
And being able to transition, you know, because that is a season, and being able to transition from the season where maybe your hours are spent apart to a place where you do recognize a joint calling. What are some tools for people when I think that's revolutionary, honestly, because people get married thinking they'll support what I'm going to do. Or even young Christians where it's like, are you called to the missions field? Because I am called to the missions field. It's like, you really don't know. Like, I know that you think you know, and that's cute, but ultimately, you don't know what the rest of your life is going to look like. So coming to a place of recognizing, because you're saying this, digging into this is for the health. It's like a tree or some really vibrant plant. You want to dig down to the root so that there's health and vitality, because your marriage is supposed to be a place of strength. I mean, it is either the best thing or the worst thing.
There's no in between.
Like there is no neutral ground. And if you think it's neutral, it's probably not the best thing. So it being a place of strength and it being a place of calling, because ultimately, like, God has a destiny on our life. And he has such a specific purpose in the people who he brings together in a covenant, in a marriage, in a union. I mean, and even seeing that in y'all's life and the way that I have no idea how many hours you are allotted in a day, but I'm sure it's more than us because of the amount of like spoons or pots that you have spoons in. I'm like, I don't know.
The
I don't know how
capacity,
you
yeah.
do it. The capacity is wild, but that this has become a source of strength and you see it for the larger, grander purpose
Yeah.
that you're invited into.
Well, I think it was a gift of God to just give you even a vision of 2012, which was the year of Rebekah. You should talk
Yeah,
about
we referenced this in our own marriage, and now we're talking about it openly. But we called it the year of Rebekah. It was a year we moved to New York. We'd been there a year. She'd been walking through a lot of her own journey that she tells a lot in her books about panic and that being a new thing for her. And I was recognizing in her that the kids were now back in school. She was, our youngest had gone off to kindergarten. She finally had time to maybe cultivate to what were those gifts
After
God
about
had
a
given
decade.
her. Yeah, after a decade of investing in the children more and supporting me. I mean, this part of our story was Rebekah deciding when I decided to leave a well-paying career job to launch a ministry organization that had no certainty of what this was going to be. She said, I'm going to support you. I'm all in. How can I help?
Yeah.
She'd been doing that for years. We finally get to a point where I realize she's in some ways flailing a bit, just trying to support the kids, support me. And we haven't taken the time to focus on what is her gifts? What is the calling and burden God's put on her heart?
Yeah.
And so we took time that year. I stepped back from some of my responsibilities. I had to get off a board or two. I had to take more time to go, I'm going to take care of the kids when they get home from school. So you can have a little more time to process or to learn or to go get the skills that you need. And during that year, it was where God really revealed to Rebekah her gifts, her gift of writing, her story, how he would perhaps want to use her in the world to help other people heal. And her being so joyful and feeling purposeful and meaningful. For any husband out there who you feel like your wife's miserable, why don't you take a moment and sit and curiously just investigate with her, what are her gifts? Is she even using them?
Yeah.
Because it's hard for someone to be miserable when they're really exercising the gifts, the story, the calling that God's put on their heart. And so then that was the beginning of now, 13 years of navigating how to support one another.
Yeah.
It's not just how does she support her husband? It's no, how do I support Rebekah? God, I think when he sees a couple together in covenant with him, he's going, not only do you each have maybe individual specific purposes and assignments and callings,
Yeah.
but there's something in that concentric circle that's unique probably for you as a couple.
Yeah.
And when you can start to uncover that, then you start to find this beautiful space of operating together. And we've just seen God, in our marriage, bless both our marriage, but we've been able to see how he's used it to help others.
Yeah.
Yeah, he jokes that it was the year of Rebekah and then every year since, which isn't true. But what he's really saying when he says that, what he's really
season
saying
of
is like,
Rebekah.
this is the new normal
Yeah.
for our marriage, is that we are co-parenting, co-calling, like we're sharing the load both. And I want to make sure there's no confusion that we're not saying calling is outside the home.
Right.
It's just there's different expressions. So we are both called to parent inside the home. We're both called to lead organizations and to speak and write just in this season, whatever God has for as long as he has. That's more outside the home. And that will require this partnership. And so in the book, we talk about from individuals to partners in that career or that calling and vocational chapter, because if we see each other as partners, then even today, he had something early this morning. So I'm making sure that we even have to rotate who's doing the morning, drop offs in the school bus, who's doing the afternoon, who's doing the laundry, who's doing, and then who's jumping on a flight to go do a keynote or whatever. And it's actually been really joyful to feel partnered in that versus
Yeah.
me kind of, I think a lot of moms in those early years, I'll speak for myself, there was a lot of hidden and feeling alone and almost invisible. And partly because we weren't having extended adult conversations and we were basically eating the leftovers of what we made our kids for lunch. We just kind of denied any aspirational ideas outside of the home because that was almost frowned upon, that no, you should be so fulfilled in this role. And yes, that was rewarding and beautiful, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But that's not the whole of who we are, right? Like my role as a mother isn't the whole of me. That's a fraction that the Lord entrusted, and I'm grateful. So it's sweet to now go, okay, and we're inviting a lot of people at these retreats to reimagine, and some of them to go away from our marriage retreats or our mental health retreats and go, like, we love the content, but what we're really taking away is the dynamic between the two of you. Because we're watching you here lead this keynote or this conference, and then we go to your home tonight, and Kate and Joy are running around, and we're watching you co-parent while you're also like just really you can normalize it. And I think there doesn't have to be this like outer version of you and this inner version of you, but just integrate it again. As a female, I'm like, what you see is what you get, you know, both here and outside of that. And it has made, I think it's been fruitful when one person's like running after God, you get the execution of that one person. But when you and your partner are, you get 10x. You just, you get the support, the cheer. I get to bounce ideas. I hear you go like, actually, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm like, thank you for telling me that before I proposed it to like 4 other people, you know? So we have each other's back in that, and we will be honest, even in the areas we need to improve, but not in a way that's hurtful or, you know, threatening that, you know, you might take that harder from somebody else. So that has been huge for us. And we always invite couples, find that concentric circle. You don't have to have the same careers. It doesn't have to be the same exact expression. But whatever you're both doing in your places of influence, there's probably a middle space that together the two of you is like the gold. Like, you know, like the best part of the two of you comes together, and you might have this little sweet spot that has impact greater than you even are trying to do. And you may or may not even be getting paid for it. It might just be something that you're
be hospitality.
Yeah.
Like we host people for dinner in our home, or, you know, it can be something that's not so career oriented. And it's more like, hey, we share this together.
It's a passion.
Let's do it beautifully. Let's enjoy how we do it together and serve other people.
Because we do share parenting, most obviously, on some level. But we haven't, a lot of couples haven't thought of how do we serve someone outside of the home together, outside of our children. The other thing you asked about, like what tools or tips, I would say was just this idea of making sure that we're curious constantly about like the needs of the other person and still waiting for like a fight, you know? Usually it's like, it's just getting ahead of it and being more proactive, I think, on those conversations up front.
I love that. Something you shared earlier about the walk, I was thinking about that. And a walk engages both hemispheres of the brain. So if you lean more to the left or the right, that's a place where you can come together and start to articulate and experience and process things in a fresh way. And you're not intimidated sitting across the table. And I get that. Austin, a friend of ours, calls it forehead time. It's so anyway, but that could be intimidating. And so I think a very practical thing for couples who've heard this, like go on walks together and just see what comes out of those walks. And the other thing that struck me is we're always going to be fighting for marriage. Like it's worth fighting for. And it's this idea of, are you going to fight proactively or reactively? And it's like, you are going to fight though. And I think a lot of people think there's something wrong that I'm having to fight for this. Like, this should be easier. If this was right, it would be easy. And you said this at the beginning. No, if it's good, if it's beautiful, if it's holy, it's something worth fighting for. It's something worth laying your life down for. And I love that. Anyway, that was going through my head as you were sharing.
Well, it's that idea of friction helps create something more beautiful than everything just being easy. And our culture has told us that marriage should be easy. Sex should be easy. Career should be simple and easy. Parenting should just be fun. I mean, we sort of buy these ideas that if it's not, or if I'm experiencing anything that's difficult, there's a problem here. And I know our message to younger couples is, hey, it's normal that you're running into friction in your relationship. This is all part of how God's going to sanctify you. Through Rebekah, God's helped me become a better, holier person, a better man. And I think she'd say the same. Like, that's the process. You guys have been through that. Like, it's a shaping process. And our hope is that people will move away from a culture that tells you that this is all about yourself, it's all about me, and start to understand and embrace God's vision, which is it's about an us. It's a powerful us. And when that us was envisioned from the very beginning, like the first thing that happens is God creates an us, because he says, this is what's going to help the world flourish. That obviously the enemy's going to try to kill that, attack it. It kills generations. It completely moves us away from God's vision for blessing and generational blessing after blessing. And so I think for us, our hope as couples, we'll start to move away from a me-centered vision towards an us-centered vision.
I love that.
Good.
Well, I know there's going to be a lot of couples who want to go deeper And so we're going to put all the links in the description so y'all can access it. The marriage retreats, the book, so they can get the book, the workbook journal that's coming out. We'll put it all in there. And also the Think event coming up in October.
Yeah, October
which
2nd to 4th.
I'm really excited about that.
We do that every year, and we've loved having Messenger as a part of that, and you guys consistently, Julie making sourdough,
I know.
teaching people how to make
Yeah.
sourdough.
I'm like, get back in your house and make salad.
Yes. we try to create an event called Think Summit that is designed for parents, for leaders, but it's a space to learn about the conversations happening in culture. But we don't want to just be in our heads. We want to be working with our hands. So it's a pretty fun experience where people can choose their own adventure, essentially, of what they want to learn about in this cultural moment and how to apply it to their own leadership, their family. And so,
We love it.
hope
It's
people come.
circled on our calendar, and it's been very impactful in our lives. Well,
Yeah.
we love y'all. Thank you for
Thank you,
being here. Looking
guys.
forward to dinner tonight.
I know.
It's going to be a lot of
I
fun.
know.
I love it. You're bringing it, right?
We are bringing it.
That's
For
what I love
everyone,
about dinner.
got this right here. Next year, we get the book.
Yeah, the fight for us. And I was just thinking, as you were talking, Gabe, like that individual mindset really is such a smallness. And I think that is, we cannot discount how the enemy of our soul would love for us to just zoom in and live so small. And coming back to the reality of like, we experience y'all's life. Y'all's life rubs on our life in such a profound and enlarging way through the Think Summit, through couples Bible study. It's like big and small.
Yeah.
It really does. And that you have not settled for the small way of thinking, but that you did fight, that you continue to fight. You're committed to moving into the largeness of everything that God has for your marriage to impact. And so honestly, like, I've loved going through this. We're going to keep going through it. We're definitely going to take y'all up on any kind of marriage counseling. And we didn't even touch on community, and we're totally out of time. But the reality of community and what it looks like to do this, I mean, these ideas are lost right now.
Yeah.
And so knowing that that is so crucial, again, all of this, all of the stories y'all have told, were just kind of snippets of the largeness of what this book is. It's a great book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know
Thank
we're
y'all.
done, but what I meant to say earlier, and I forgot, and this is the last thing, what will help so much in your conversations on walks or even your conversations with community is just develop this mantra that no topic is off limits.
Yeah.
And when we did that as parents, then we started to do that as husband and wife. It was just, we wanted to create a safe place to say anything we were wrestling with without shame, without rejection or abandonment in that fear. And that's a game changer. That helps you go, okay, all of these things we're internalizing, if we can just get them on the table, at least we know what we're working with and we can invite God into the center of that. So please encourage, please feel the freedom to, shame is a killer. And so just if there's those inner things that you just are so afraid to say to your spouse, confess them first to God and then ask for the courage and the grace to confess them to one another. And then I truly think that is a major shift to how you engage going forward.
For sure. Would you pray us out?
Yes, I would love that. Thank you, Lord, for this time. Thank you for Addison and Julie and the gift they are to so many. Selfishly, we are so thankful that they live close and that we get to see them often and do life with them and their children. I just pray blessing over them. I pray blessing over everyone who is watching this, who will see this in the days and weeks ahead. Lord, that they would feel a quickening in their spirit, like an encouragement from the Father, right? An encouragement to lean in, to look at the person that you've entrusted to them for the entirety of their lives and see their spouse the way God sees them. Just see each other the way you see them, Lord. And sometimes we just have to ask for that. Lord, show me what you see in Gabe. Show me what you're doing. Let me be one who beholds. May we just start to see our spouse, Lord, as something beautiful that's been entrusted to us that we get to steward and we get to decide how we're going to respond. Are we going to put up walls and stay angry or unforgiving or resentful? Or are we going to just surrender those fears and those doubts and that lack of faith at the foot of the cross for you to deal with? Because I just pray, Lord, that there would be a a resurrection life that comes upon marriages in our world, especially in the church. There would be revived hearts and united hearts and hearts that just have a holy imagination for something more, something more than they maybe were shown, something more than they even believe for themselves because of their own hurt or distance. God, would you just intervene and get in the middle of it? And give them the courage, God, to lean and go like, I don't even know where to go from here or how to go from here. But they would look each other in the eye and say, but I want to try.
Yeah.
God, would you give us hearts that want to try, that desire for restoration and for healing and resurrection, God. And so that the marriages that come out of this wouldn't be like maintained or fixed up or managed, but no, the marriages that would come out of this would be new creations, resurrected lives, Zoe life, like a divine, eternal resurrection life. And I pray that over every marriage that hears this, because we just don't want to maintain the old. We want to be invited into the new thing. And we give you thanks in advance that you are always in the work of this. You are always in the work of the death of the old so that the new is here. And so we praise you in advance for what you're going to do and what you're doing right now. In your mighty name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.